Welcome to Dark Creaky TV. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe for the best Reddit creepypasta stories, perfect for bedtime chills. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to leave a comment. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the story. I've always been fascinated by the supernatural. Ghost stories, haunted houses, and tales of the unknown were my go-to entertainment. So, when my best friend Lisa suggested we try a Ouija board, I was all in. Little did I know, that decision would change my life forever in the most horrific way possible. It was a chilly Friday night, and the wind howled outside Lisa's old Victorian house. The perfect setting for a night of spooky fun. We set up the board in her dimly lit living room, candles flickering around us. The air was thick with anticipation and, looking back, a sinister energy I didn't recognize at the time. Lisa and I, along with our friends Mike and Sarah, placed our fingers on the planchette. We started with the usual questions, asking if anyone was there and waiting for a response. At first, nothing happened. Just when we were about to give up, the planchette moved. Slowly, deliberately, it spelled out Hello. A chill ran down my spine. We exchanged nervous glances but pressed on. "Who are we speaking to?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. The planchette moved again, faster this time. Damien. Damien. None of us knew anyone by that name. "What do you want?" Mike asked, his bravado wavering. Kill. We froze. This wasn't the playful spirit we hoped to contact. "Who do you want to kill?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. The response was immediate. "You." We all jerked our hands away from the board, the planchette skidding across the surface. The candles flickered violently, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "This isn't funny," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Let's just put this away." But Lisa, ever the skeptic, insisted it was just a game. She convinced us to continue, though reluctantly. We resumed, asking the spirit why it wanted to kill us. The planchette moved again, almost angrily. Notagame. My heart pounded in my chest. We were in over our heads, but curiosity and a strange compulsion kept us going. "What do you want us to do?" I asked, dreading the answer. Followme. "Follow you where?" Lisa asked, her skepticism giving way to genuine fear. Tothebody. We all pulled our hands back, the room feeling like it was closing in on us. "Body? What body?" Mike stammered. The planchette didn't move. The room was silent except for the sound of our ragged breathing. "We need to stop," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "This is too much." But before we could pack up, the board flipped over on its own, sending the planchette flying. The candles went out simultaneously, plunging us into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The room looked normal, but nothing felt right. "We need to leave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Now." We grabbed our things and hurried out of Lisa's house. The cold night air felt like a slap in the face, but it was a relief after the oppressive atmosphere inside. We stood on her porch, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Do you think it was real?" Lisa asked, her voice small. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I don't want to find out." We decided to call it a night and go home, each of us shaken to our core. Little did I know, that was only the beginning. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the planchette moving on its own, spelling out those chilling words. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with fear and curiosity. Around 3 a.m, I finally drifted into a fitful sleep, only to be woken by a loud banging on my window. I shot up, my heart in my throat. I lived on the second floor, so it wasn't possible for someone to be outside my window. I tried to calm myself, convincing myself it was just a branch hitting the glass. But then I heard it again. 3 loud, deliberate bangs. I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight and pointing it at the window. Nothing. I took a deep breath and got out of bed, my legs shaking as I approached the window. I peered outside, seeing nothing but the dark, empty street. I let out a shaky sigh, closing the curtains and backing away. As I turned around, I froze. Written on my mirror, in what looked like blood, were the words, FOLLOWME. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a prank, right? But who would do this? And how? I grabbed my phone and called Lisa, my hands trembling. She answered groggily. "What's wrong?" she asked, hearing the panic in my voice. "Someone wrote on my mirror," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "In blood." "What? Are you serious?" She was fully awake now. "Yes, it says follow me." There was a long pause. "I'll be right over," she finally said. "Don't go anywhere." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and hung up. I sat on my bed, clutching my phone, my eyes glued to the mirror. The words seemed to pulse, mocking me. Lisa arrived 10 minutes later, out of breath and wide-eyed. She took one look at the mirror and went pale. "We need to call the police," she said, but something in me knew that wouldn't help. This was beyond the realm of the normal. "They won't believe us," I said. "They'll think it's a prank." "Then what do we do?" Lisa asked, her voice breaking. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think we need to find out what this thing wants." We spent the rest of the night researching Ouija boards and demons, trying to find anything that could explain what was happening. The more we read, the more terrified we became. Stories of possession, death, and torment filled the screen, each one worse than the last. As dawn broke, we decided we needed to go back to where it all started, Lisa's house. We packed a bag with supplies, salt, holy water, and anything else the internet suggested might help, and headed over. Her house felt different in the daylight, less menacing, but the memory of the night before lingered. We set up the Ouija board again, hoping to get some answers. "Damien, are you here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The planchette moved instantly. "YES. What do you want from us?" Lisa asked, her hand shaking. "FINDTHEBODY. "Where is it?" I asked, my heart pounding. The planchette moved slowly, deliberately. FOLLOW. A sudden noise from the basement made us jump. We looked at each other, dread filling our hearts. We knew where we had to go. With a deep breath, we grabbed our flashlights and headed towards the basement door. The air grew colder with each step, and a sense of impending doom settled over us. As we reached the door, it creaked open on its own. We stepped inside, the darkness swallowing us. The smell hit us first, a putrid metallic scent that made my stomach churn. We followed the smell, our flashlights cutting through the thick darkness. At the far end of the basement, something caught the light, a shape slumped against the wall. We approached slowly, the reality of what we were seeing dawning on us. It was a man's body, decomposing and covered in blood. His eyes were wide open, a look of sheer terror frozen on his face. On the wall behind him, written in blood, were the words, FOLLOWME. I turned to Lisa, my heart racing. "We need to call the police now," I said, my voice shaking. But before we could move, the basement door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. The air grew thick with the scent of decay and something else, something malevolent. The candles we had brought flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped my shoulder, and I screamed. Lisa's flashlight hit the floor, rolling away and casting wild beams of light around the room. We turned to run, but the darkness seemed to press in on us, suffocating and relentless. Whispers filled the air, unintelligible but filled with malice. The planchette from the Ouija board skidded across the floor, stopping at our feet. "Follow me," the whispers said, louder now, more insistent. Lisa grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the stairs. But as we reached them, something yanked her back, sending her sprawling to the floor. I tried to pull her up, but an invisible force held her down, her screams echoing in the darkness. Desperation and terror filled my mind as I watched her struggle, the shadows around us seeming to come alive. I grabbed the holy water, splashing it in all directions, hoping it would help. The whispers turned to screams, and the grip on Lisa loosened. I pulled her up, and we ran up the stairs, not looking back. We burst out of the basement, slamming the door behind us. The house was silent again, but the sense of dread remained. We collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath, our minds struggling to process what had just happened. "We need to get out of here," Lisa said, her voice trembling. I nodded, but something inside me knew it wasn't over. The demon had shown us the body, but I had a feeling it wanted more, much more. As we left Lisa's house, the words on my mirror echoed in my mind. "Follow me." This was just the beginning of a nightmare we couldn't escape. And deep down, I knew the demon wouldn't rest until it got what it wanted. But what did it want? And why had it chosen us? The answers lay ahead, in a journey filled with terror and darkness, leading us deeper into a world we were never meant to enter. We would follow the demon's trail, but at what cost? After that harrowing night at Lisa's house, we knew we couldn't go back to our normal lives. Something evil had been unleashed, and it had chosen us as its victims. We needed answers, and fast. Lisa and I decided to meet at a local cafe the next morning, a neutral ground where we could think clearly. The place was bustling with people, the clatter of dishes and murmur of conversation a stark contrast to the silence that had pervaded Lisa's house. But even here, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. We sat in a corner booth, nursing our coffees and trying to piece together what we knew. "We need to figure out who that man was," Lisa said, her eyes scanning the room as if she expected the demon to appear at any moment. I nodded. "And why the demon led us to his body? There has to be a reason." We decided to start with the police report. We couldn't exactly tell them we found the body through a Ouija board session, so we kept our story simple. We were exploring Lisa's basement when we found the corpse. The officers were skeptical, but took our statement and promised to investigate. Days passed, and we heard nothing. The waiting was unbearable, the sense of impending doom growing stronger with each passing hour. I began to have nightmares, vivid and horrifying, where the demon Damien would visit me, whispering threats and promises of pain. Each morning, I woke drenched in sweat, the words "follow me" echoing in my mind. Then, one night, everything changed. I was jolted awake by a loud crash downstairs. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and crept down the stairs. The living room was a mess, books and furniture strewn about, as if a tornado had ripped through the place. And there, on the wall, written in the same bloody script, were the words FOLLOWME. I stumbled back, my mind racing. This was no coincidence. The demon was targeting me directly now. I called Lisa, my hands shaking as I dialed. "It's happening again," I said as soon as she answered. "We need to figure this out before it's too late." She came over, and we sat in my living room. The chaos around us a stark reminder of the danger we were in. "We need to find out who that man was," Lisa said, her voice firm. "Maybe that will give us some answers." We decided to dig into local missing persons reports, starting with the time frame we estimated the body had been there. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. We spent hours poring over news articles and police reports, our eyes burning from staring at the screen. Finally, we found something. A man named Jonathan Reed had gone missing about 6 months ago. The description matched the body we had found. Tall, brown hair, mid-30s. According to the report, he had been a local historian, researching old legends and folklore. We tracked down his address and decided to pay a visit. His house was a small, unassuming place on the outskirts of town. As we approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The air was thick with tension, and every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. The door was unlocked, and we stepped inside, calling out his name, just in case. The house was eerily silent, dust motes dancing in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the windows. It was clear no one had been here for months. We started searching for anything that might give us a clue about what had happened to him. In his study, we found piles of books and papers, all related to local legends and folklore. One book in particular caught my eye. It was an old leather-bound volume with strange symbols etched into the cover. Inside, we found detailed notes about a demon named Damien, said to haunt those who dared to summon him. According to the legend, Damien was a malevolent spirit who thrived on fear and chaos. He would torment his victims, driving them to the brink of insanity before finally claiming their souls. The only way to stop him, the note said, was to uncover the secret of his origin and perform a ritual to banish him back to the underworld. We knew we were on the right track. Jonathan Reed had clearly been researching Damien, and it seemed the demon had killed him to stop him from revealing the truth. But why was the demon now targeting us? As we left the house, we felt a renewed sense of determination. We needed to find out more about Damien and perform the ritual to banish him before it was too late. That night, I had another nightmare. I was back in the basement, standing in front of Jonathan Reed's body. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Follow me," they said over and over again. Suddenly the body jerked upright, its eyes locking onto mine. "You can't escape me," it hissed, its voice a chilling rasp. I woke up, gasping for breath. The nightmare felt so real, as if the demon was reaching out to me from the depths of the underworld. I knew we didn't have much time. The demon was getting stronger, and its hold on us was tightening. Lisa and I spent the next few days gathering everything we needed for the ritual. The old book had detailed instructions, but they were vague and filled with symbols we didn't fully understand. We consulted online forums and even reached out to a few paranormal experts, hoping to get some clarity. One of the experts, a woman named Evelyn, agreed to meet with us. She was an older woman, her hair streaked with grey, and her eyes held a depth of knowledge and experience that was both reassuring and unsettling. We met at her house, a small cottage filled with the scent of herbs and candles. "You're dealing with a powerful entity," she said after we explained our situation. "Damien is not just any demon. He feeds on fear and chaos, and he won't stop until he's consumed you entirely." "Is there any way to stop him?" Lisa asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "There is," Evelyn said, her expression serious. "But it won't be easy. You'll need to confront him directly and perform the banishment ritual. But be warned, Damien will do everything in his power to stop you." She gave us a list of items we would need, along with detailed instructions on how to perform the ritual. It was a daunting task, but we knew we had no other choice. As we left Evelyn's house, a sense of dread settled over us. We were about to face a demon, one who had already claimed a life and was now coming for us. But we were determined to end this nightmare once and for all. The next few days were a blur of preparation. We gathered the necessary items, candles, herbs, a ceremonial dagger, and practiced the ritual over and over, making sure we knew every step by heart. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense, the weight of what we were about to do pressing down on us. Finally, the night of the ritual arrived. We chose Lisa's basement as the location, the place where this nightmare had begun. The air was thick with anticipation as we set up the ritual space, drawing symbols on the floor and lighting the candles. We stood in a circle, holding hands and reciting the incantation Evelyn had taught us. The room seemed to grow colder with each word, the shadows deepening and swirling around us. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. A chilling laugh echoed through the basement, and the air grew thick with the scent of decay. "You think you can banish me?" Damien's voice hissed, seeming to come from all directions at once. "You're mine." The shadows coalesced into a dark figure, its eyes glowing with malevolent light. Lisa and I tightened our grip on each other's hands, fear threatening to overwhelm us. "Continue the ritual," I whispered, my voice shaking. We recited the final incantation, the words feeling heavy and powerful in our mouths. The figure recoiled, its form flickering as if struggling to maintain its shape. The air crackled with energy and the ground beneath us seemed to tremble. With a final, desperate scream, the figure dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, which was then sucked into the ceremonial dagger. The room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if a weight had been removed. We collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, our bodies trembling with exhaustion and relief. It was over. We had done it. Damien was banished, or so we thought. As we left the basement, the sense of victory was tempered by a lingering unease. The demon was gone, but the memories of what we had seen and experienced would haunt us forever. And deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. The nightmare had left its mark on us, and I knew that some evils never truly die. Despite our triumph over Damien, an uneasy calm settled over us. We went back to our lives, trying to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, but the events of the past weeks had left scars that wouldn't easily heal. I threw myself into my work, hoping to distract myself. Lisa too seemed eager to move on, though the haunted look in her eyes told me she was struggling as much as I was. We met less frequently, the shared trauma creating a rift between us rather than bringing us closer. One night, about a month after the ritual, I was working late when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. "Can you come over? It's urgent." My heart sank. Something in her message felt off, a sense of urgency and fear that I couldn't ignore. I grabbed my keys and rushed to her house, dread gnawing at my insides. When I arrived, the house was dark. I knocked, but there was no answer. Panic rising, I tried the door. It was unlocked. I stepped inside, calling her name. The silence was thick, oppressive. "Lisa, are you here?" My voice echoed through the empty house. I made my way to the living room, my heart pounding. There, on the coffee table, was the Ouija board. My blood ran cold. We had agreed to never touch it again. Why was it out? "Lisa!" I called again, louder this time. A faint sound reached my ears, a soft, shuffling noise coming from the basement. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as I approached the basement door. It was ajar, and a dim light flickered from below. With a deep breath, I descended the stairs. The basement was eerily quiet, the air heavy with a familiar sense of dread. As I reached the bottom, I saw Lisa. She was sitting on the floor, her back to me, the Ouija board in front of her. "Lisa, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't respond. I moved closer, and that's when I saw it. Her fingers were on the planchette, which was moving rapidly, spelling out words I couldn't see. "Lisa, stop! You know what this can do." I reached out to grab her shoulder. As my hand touched her, she turned to face me. Her eyes were wide and unseeing, her face pale and twisted in terror. "I had to know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had to know if it was really over." Before I could react, the room seemed to shift, the walls closing in. The air grew cold, and the shadows deepened. The planchette flew off the board, skittering across the floor. The candles around us flared up, casting eerie shadows on the walls. And then I saw him. Damien. His form materialized from the darkness, more solid and menacing than before. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and his grin was pure evil. "You thought you could banish me?" His voice was a low, rumbling growl. "You're mine, forever." I grabbed Lisa's hand, trying to pull her up, but she seemed rooted to the spot. "We have to go," I shouted, my voice echoing in the confined space. But before we could move, Damien reached out, his hand passing through Lisa's chest. She gasped, her body convulsing as he gripped her heart. Her eyes rolled back and she collapsed, lifeless. "No!" I screamed, falling to my knees beside her. I shook her, but she didn't respond. Tears streamed down my face as I looked up at Damien, rage and despair mingling in my heart. "You will suffer," he said, his form flickering as if he were struggling to maintain his presence. "I will make sure of it." The candles flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The basement was empty, Lisa's body the only reminder of the nightmare that had just occurred. I called 911, my voice trembling as I explained what had happened. They arrived quickly, but their questions were met with confusion and disbelief. How could I explain that a demon had killed my best friend? They ruled it a heart attack, the stress of the past weeks finally taking its toll on Lisa. But I knew the truth. Damien had claimed his first victim, and I feared he wouldn't stop there. In the days that followed, I was consumed by guilt and grief. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa's lifeless face and Damien's malevolent grin. I knew I couldn't face this alone. I reached out to Evelyn, the paranormal expert who had helped us before. She listened patiently as I recounted what had happened. "It's not over," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Damien is still here, and he's more powerful than ever." "What do I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "There's only one way to end this," she said. "You need to find the source of Damien's power and destroy it. Only then will he be banished for good." "But how do I find it?" I asked, my mind reeling. "Jonathan Reed's research," she said. "He was close to finding the answer. You need to continue where he left off." I thanked her and hung up, a renewed sense of purpose filling me. I went back to Jonathan's house, searching through his notes and books for any clue that might lead me to Damien's source of power. Hours turned into days, and days into weeks, but I finally found something. A passage in one of the old books described a ritual, one that would reveal the demon's source of power. It was dangerous and complex, but I had no other choice. I gathered the necessary items and prepared myself for what lay ahead. The ritual had to be performed at midnight in a place of great spiritual significance. I chose an old church on the outskirts of town, abandoned and forgotten. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding as I set up the ritual space, drawing symbols on the ground and lighting the candles. As the clock struck midnight, I began the incantation, my voice trembling but determined. The air grew colder and the shadows deepened, swirling around me. The ground beneath me trembled, and a low growl echoed through the empty church. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the room, and I saw Damien, his form more solid and menacing than ever. He snarled, his eyes glowing with rage. "You cannot defeat me," he hissed. "I am eternal." But I pressed on, reciting the final words of the incantation. The ground shook violently, and the air crackled with energy. Damien's form flickered, and he let out a roar of fury. A beam of light shot from the symbols on the ground, striking Damien and enveloping him in a blinding glow. He screamed, his form disintegrating into smoke. The light intensified, and with a final deafening roar, Damien was gone. The church fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted but relieved. It was over. Damien was banished. As I left the church, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. The nightmare was over. But the memories of what I had seen and experienced would haunt me forever. Lisa's death was a wound that would never fully heal, a reminder of the price we had paid. But I knew she was at peace now, free from Damien's grasp. I returned home, determined to rebuild my life. The scars would remain, but I was stronger for having faced the darkness and survived. But deep down, a part of me knew that some evils never truly die, and as I closed my eyes that night, the words "follow me" echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of the darkness that still lurked in the shadows. After banishing Damien, I hoped life would return to normal, but the sense of foreboding never left me. The memories of that night in the church and Lisa's tragic end haunted my every waking moment. I tried to find solace in the ordinary, but everything felt tinged with the supernatural horrors I had faced. One evening, while I was cleaning out my attic, I stumbled upon an old, dusty box. Inside were trinkets and photographs from my childhood. Among them, I found a familiar-looking book. It was Jonathan Reed's research journal. I had forgotten I had taken it during my frantic search for answers. As I flipped through its pages, I found a section I hadn't noticed before. It detailed an ancient legend about a cursed family, whose members were marked by a demon named Damien. According to the journal, the demon would return every few generations to torment the family, feeding on their fear and suffering. My blood ran cold as I realized why Damien had chosen us. My family must be part of that cursed lineage. Determined to end this curse once and for all, I called Evelyn again. She listened intently as I explained my discovery. "This changes everything," she said. "If your family is indeed cursed, we need to perform a much more powerful ritual to break the bond completely." We arranged to meet at her cottage the next day to prepare for the ritual. Evelyn explained that we needed a rare artifact, a talisman that had been used to bind Damien to our family in the first place. According to the legend, the talisman was hidden in a place of great personal significance to the original family member who had made the pact with the demon. I spent the next few days researching my family history, looking for any clues that might lead me to the talisman. It was a daunting task, but I was driven by a desperate need to end this nightmare once and for all. Finally, I found a reference to an old cabin in the woods, a place my great-great-grandfather had built. It was mentioned in a letter my grandmother had written to my father, describing it as a place where the family would gather during the summer. I knew I had to go there. I called Evelyn and told her what I had found. "Be careful," she warned. "If Damien senses what you're trying to do, he will try to stop you." I packed my things and headed to the cabin, the drive filled with a sense of dread and determination. The cabin was deep in the woods, isolated and forgotten. As I approached, I felt a chill run down my spine. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, and the trees seemed to whisper warnings. The cabin was old and dilapidated, but still standing. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, the air thick with dust and memories. I searched the cabin, looking for any sign of the talisman. Hours passed, and frustration began to set in. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed a loose floorboard in the corner of the living room. I pried it up, revealing a small, ornately carved box. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a tarnished silver talisman, its surface etched with strange symbols. As soon as I touched the talisman, the air grew colder, and the shadows deepened. I could feel Damien's presence, his anger and desperation palpable. I knew I had to act quickly. I called Evelyn and told her I had found the talisman. She instructed me to bring it to her cottage immediately. The drive back was a blur, my mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. When I arrived, Evelyn had already prepared the ritual space. The atmosphere was charged with energy, the air crackling with anticipation. We placed the talisman in the center of a circle of candles, each inscribed with protective symbols. Evelyn began the incantation, her voice steady and powerful. The ground trembled beneath us, and the shadows seemed to come alive. I joined in, reciting the words she had taught me. The talisman began to glow, its light growing brighter and more intense. Suddenly, a deafening roar filled the room, and Damien's form appeared, more menacing than ever. His eyes blazed with fury, and his voice was a low, rumbling growl. "You cannot break the bond," he hissed. "You are mine!" But we pressed on, our voices rising in unison. The talisman's light enveloped Damien, and he writhed in agony, his form flickering and shifting. The air crackled with energy, and the ground shook violently. With a final desperate scream, Damien's form disintegrated, the light from the talisman consuming him entirely. The room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. The talisman lay on the ground, its glow fading. Evelyn and I collapsed to the floor, exhausted but relieved. It was over. The curse was broken. As I left Evelyn's cottage, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon, I felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. The nightmare was over, but the memories of what I had seen and experienced would haunt me forever. Lisa's death was a wound that would never fully heal, a reminder of the price we had paid. But I knew she was at peace now, free from Damien's grasp. I returned home, determined to rebuild my life. The scars would remain, but I was stronger for having faced the darkness and survived. But deep down, a part of me knew that some evils never truly die. And as I closed my eyes that night, the words "follow me" echoed in my mind. A chilling reminder of the darkness that still lurked in the shadows. The journey to break the curse had ended, but the battle to heal and find peace had just begun. Life after the ritual was a strange mix of relief and unease. While Damien had been banished and the curse seemingly broken, the trauma of what had happened lingered. I struggled with nightmares and an unshakable feeling that something was still watching me. The sense of dread was a constant companion, and I often found myself looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Damien's malevolent grin. I tried to return to normalcy, throwing myself into work and reconnecting with friends and family. But the shadow of the past was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. One night, I decided to visit Lisa's grave. I felt a deep need to say goodbye properly, to find some closure for her tragic death. The cemetery was quiet, the moon casting an eerie glow over the tombstones. I made my way to Lisa's grave, the air heavy with sorrow. As I knelt beside her tombstone, tears streaming down my face, I whispered an apology for dragging her into this nightmare. I promised her that I would find a way to move on, to honour her memory by living my life to the fullest. Just as I was about to leave, I felt a sudden chill. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I turned around, expecting to see nothing. But there, standing at the edge of the cemetery, was a figure cloaked in shadows. My heart raced as I realised who it was. Damien. No, I whispered, backing away. This can't be happening. We banished you. Damien's form flickered, his eyes glowing with a familiar malevolence. You cannot escape me, he hissed, his voice sending chills down my spine. The curse was never truly broken. I will always find a way back. I ran, my mind racing with terror and confusion. How could he still be here? Had we missed something in the ritual? As I fled the cemetery, I knew I needed to find Evelyn. She was my only hope of understanding what had gone wrong. I drove to her cottage, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. When I arrived, I banged on the door, my panic evident in every movement. Evelyn opened the door, her eyes widening as she saw my state. He's back, I gasped. Damien is back. The ritual didn't work. Evelyn's face paled, and she ushered me inside. Tell me everything, she said. Her voice calm but urgent. I recounted what had happened at the cemetery, and she listened intently, her expression growing more serious by the minute. When I finished, she took a deep breath. There must be something we missed, she said. Something tying Damien to this world that we didn't account for. We spent hours poring over her books and notes, searching for any clue that might explain Damien's return. Finally, we found it. A passage in an ancient text describing how some demons could anchor themselves to a place or an object, allowing them to return, even after being banished. Is there anything in your family's history that might serve as such an anchor? Evelyn asked. I thought back to everything I had discovered about my family. Then it hit me, the old cabin. It had been a place of great significance to my ancestors, the place where the original pact with Damien had likely been made. We need to go back to the cabin, I said, determination in my voice. There must be something there we missed. Evelyn nodded, and we gathered our supplies, preparing for what we hoped would be the final confrontation. The drive to the cabin was filled with a tense silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived, the cabin looked even more foreboding than before. We entered cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. I led Evelyn to the spot where I had found the talisman, and we began searching for any hidden compartments or objects that might be the anchor. After what felt like hours, Evelyn found a loose brick in the fireplace. Behind it was a small rusted box. We opened it, revealing a bundle of old yellowed papers and a small obsidian stone. The papers detailed the original pact with Damien, and the stone was described as the anchor binding him to our world. This is it, Evelyn said, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. We need to destroy this stone to sever the connection completely. We took the stone outside, setting it on a large rock. Evelyn performed a purification ritual, and together we recited the incantation to break the bond. As we finished, I raised the ceremonial dagger and brought it down on the stone with all my strength. The stone shattered, and a blinding light enveloped us. Damien's enraged scream echoed through the forest, and for a moment, the air was thick with his malevolent presence. But as the light faded, the scream turned into a howl of defeat, and then silence. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and for the first time in months, I felt a true sense of peace. Damien was gone, this time, for good. Evelyn and I left the cabin, the weight of the past finally lifting from our shoulders. I knew the journey to heal would be long, but I was ready to face it. With the curse broken, I could finally move forward, free from the shadow of Damien. As I drove home, the morning sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the horizon. I thought of Lisa and all we had been through. I vowed to live my life in a way that would make her proud, to honour her memory by embracing the peace we had fought so hard to achieve. The nightmare was over, and the darkness had been banished, but the lessons learned and the scars left behind would stay with me forever, a reminder of the strength and resilience it took to face the demons of the past and emerge victorious.